does it really happen? Is it possible? Have you ever seen a company actually ticking off all 6 of those? And maybe you haven't, and that's why you wrote the book and you want to help these organizations do this. Is this model better suited for smaller companies, medium-sized companies, large companies? What are they, how do we get this adopted? Is it possible? It sounds too good to be true, almost.
So it's only possible if people are really interested in making it happen. And there has to be a real commitment to change our own personal happiness. Arthur Brooks has created a course at Harvard called Happiness and Leadership. You might be aware of in his new book, Strength. And he really argues that because happiness in organization is such a huge impact driver of success, it's not that success leads to happiness. Happiness seems to be a driver of success because you have better relationships, you have better communication, you're more forgiving, you're more kind, you're more loving, and so on. And so if people really want to apply these concepts, they really do work. As I mentioned, in real time, we all know these things. These are simple things. There's nothing new here, but the problem is we don't practice them. So what we do in like our university courses, we require each week our students to actually practice these concepts. For example, this week in one of my courses, they're doing 3 good deeds a day for 7 days, and then they're reporting in a journal what happens. And they come back with tears in their eyes, just saying, this was one of the best weeks I've ever had. That I loved being at school. And I made some new friends. And I realized I just constantly worry about myself, me all day long. And so if people practice these concepts, they can see that they do work. And so our mission is to get people to try these in organizations and record. Don't take our word for it, just record what happens. And if it makes life better, if it makes the organization more civil, then people know that when things kind of go awry, that they maybe quit practicing these things. So we're trying to help them keep conviction of the concepts.
Well, a few things. One of the things I love is that you said, look, you got to have a sound business. You got to have a great product. You have to be focused on bringing value to the marketplace. But what's exciting is that we're coming out of the business environment of shareholder supremacy as a primary driver for everything in the way in which companies are operated. It's almost in the name of morality. I'm going to get absolute returns for my shareholders because it's the quote unquote was the adopted moral standard in Wall Street in many places. Jack Welch led the way, and then Jack Welch led the way with GE imploding, over time, and really challenging this notion that it's all about profits and shareholder returns.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is that do you sense in the marketplace with the development of your book and your priorities as it relates to how you're seeing how businesses run, a strong shift away from that orientation? In other words, into a new orientation of how great businesses can really operate.
Yeah, I think the shift is happening for 2 reasons. One is there's some great leaders with real integrity and compassion that want to create that kind of culture. And right. I can tell you about some of those that I'd
love to hear. Tell us about some of them. Give us examples.
Well, that's the first way is that the leaders want to do it. The second approach is they're being forced to do it, and they kind of go on kicking and screaming, and it's not real authentic because they need to recruit and they need to retain, and they're not doing a good job at that. So one is out of choice and passion, and the other one's kind of out of force. But let me tell you about one of my favorite organizations I work with. There's several that are great role models of what we're trying to teach here. This one's actually a rehabilitation program for convicted felons. It's called the Other Side Academy. And my good friend Dave DeRocher is the executive director. Dave spent 20 years in prison in Los Angeles. He did a 2-year prison term, was out for 3 months, went back, did a 3-year prison term, was out for a few months, went back, did a 5-year prison term, was out for 4 months, went back, did a 10-year prison term, and then he was convicted of 29 years. He was the leader of the skinheads, the white gangs in the prison in Los Angeles. He held the keys to the yard, is what they say. I mean, he was a bad, bad dude. And he was violent. He sold guns and drugs and assault. And he had a chance to go to a rehabilitation program in Los Angeles called Delancey Street. And he went through this process of these 6 concepts. He really had to take a good look at, the judges let him go and said, if you go to Delancey Street and you make it, for the required time period, it will release this prison term. But if you fail, you're back here to do your 29 years, which means he would have spent the rest of his life in prison. And he went through this incredible transformation, realizing that these perceptions that he had of himself as this horrible, bad, cool dude came early in child from abuse from his father and from getting in with the wrong crowd and using drugs early, and then realizing it was easy to be a leader of losers rather than a loser amongst leaders. And he just became the gang leader in Los Angeles. And he realized that deep in his heart, when he was younger, he was a really nice, compassionate kid. He liked people and he was kind. And so he rethought and rebuilt his character around a new concept of self, a new ego. And one of the things that he had to do is he had to quit judging all the other gangs, the Hispanic gangs and the Black gangs, and realized that they'd all had trauma and they were more similar than they were different. And so the Other Side Academy, they all lived together, the various gangs. And their model is based on good deeds. Their philosophy is when person A helps person B, person A gets better. So they build companies to support themselves. They've got about 100 convicts living together in houses here in Salt Lake City. And they build these companies and they go out, and the rehabilitation program is entrepreneurship. It's building a company, creating a winner, the envy of an industry. And their moving company right now is the #1 rated moving company in Utah. They've been stealing stuff out people's back doors. Now they carry it out the front door and move it in a moving truck somewhere else. And they're just awesome. When they're done, they'll sit down with the owner and say, hey, we noticed a scrape on the stairwell. And I don't think we did that when we moved the desk down, but we might have. So we're going to repaint that wall for you. The service is unbelievable. And forgiveness, they have to go back through their lives and forgive their parents and people that offended them. And so they go through this whole process. They share all the resources together. It's the organization is supported by its revenue. There's no outside government grants or donations. It's businesses that are well run according to these principles of integrity and service and forgiveness and refraining from judging each other. And it's, one of the most successful rehabilitation programs in the world.